Shroud University, this is Russ Brial bringing you another discussion on the Shroud of Turin, the greatest mystery of the known world.
The question is carbon dating the end of the road? Because in 1988, it was carbon dated by 3 different carbon dating labs, and they said it had a date range of 1260 to 1390. So is that it? Is it over? Do I just pack my bag and go home? Is that the end of the story? Well, today I'm Paul Harvey. I'm going to tell you the rest of the story. So I'll tell you what happened and what was supposed to happen is that in 1985, they agreed on a protocol for carbon dating, and they were going to cut at least 3 different samples from 3 different locations on the cloth. Instead, they cut 1 location from the absolute worst possible location on the shroud. And I'm going to show you where that was. This is the corner that was cut for carbon-14 dating. Now, you see that big chunk right there? That's not it. Now, we see this. Now, here's that big chunk. That was probably cut out in the 1500s, we think. And then this area here, that section right there, that's not it. That was cut in 1973 for textile analysis by a man named Gilbert Reyes. Now, this section right in here, this is what was cut for carbon-14 dating right here. And you can see that there's this kind of darkened area right in here. And there down here, you can see like there is a map to kind of show you where they cut and the 3 different samples that were used for carbon dating. And it's not a very big sample. You can see by the guy's thumb. I mean, this is not a big section that they took. But why is it a bad sample? Why is it a bad location? Well, let me show you. I got dozens of these etchings. The shroud has been exhibited hundreds of times. Ever since in about the 1413 in France, it was exhibited. And May 4th was the official feast day of the Holy Shroud and was brought out for annual exhibitions. It was brought out for royal weddings to bless the wedding. And so I put this big red arrow here to draw your attention to where these people, where these officials are holding the shroud at every point. And also, they've nicely put Jesus in boxer shorts for us here. And you'll see that's very clear too. So look, you can see again, this is another one where they're holding it. Look at the way he's grabbing it here. Look at that. Okay? And again, these are just a few of these. There's a lot of these etchings. In every instance, they are holding and grabbing the shroud exactly at that corner that they cut for carbon-14 dating. Now, how do you spell moron? You would have to be an idiot to pick that sample to be the sample that you have the most significant carbon dating test of the 20th century hangs on that sample? Well, 2005, Ray Rogers, thermal chemist with Los Alamos National Laboratory, he begins to suspect that there appears to be an anomaly. There's something wrong with that corner. It's not the same as the rest of the shroud. So he obtains thread samples from that corner. Remember the sample cut by Gilbert Reyes right there? He has samples from that section and compares it with thread samples from the main body of the shroud, and lo and behold, they are not the same. And so he goes on and publishes in a peer-reviewed scientific journal, Thermochemica Acta, in January 20th of 2005. I'm going to read you this first paragraph. In 1988, radiocarbon laboratories at Arizona, Cambridge, and Zurich determined the age of a sample from the Shroud of Turin. They reported that the date of the cloth's production lay between AD 1260 and 1390 with 95% confidence. This came as a surprise in view of the technology used to produce the cloth, its chemical composition, and the lack of vanilla in its lignin. The results prompted questions about the validity of the sample. In the second paragraph, he goes on and kind of explains all this different stuff that he found. And the bottom line is, this is the conclusion. The radiocarbon sample was not part of the original cloth of the Shroud of Turin. The radiocarbon date was thus not valid for determining the true age of the shroud. So what did he find? It appears to be a medieval repair, because in that corner we have cotton mixed with flax. Well, wait a minute. There's no cotton anywhere else on the shroud. The shroud is made out of flax. So how is it that we're getting all this cotton in this corner? And there's a clear splice where the flax and the cotton threads are spliced together. There's the presence of starch, which was used to stiffen the cotton threads to effect the repair. And there's a madder root dye on the surface, which is why you have this kind of darkened area here. Fast forward 500 or 600 years, and the dye that was meant to blend in the color of the cotton now is actually darker than the rest of the shroud. So, and in fact, I have a book which is called The Art of Invisible French Reweaving. They were so skilled at this that they could actually reweave that corner, and you would never know it unless you got down there with a big magnifying glass. And so, basically, because they only took one sample, they got fooled. They looked at it and says, sure looks like the shroud, but it wasn't. What are the latest findings? At this conference I went to last month at the Ohio State University, there were over 30 papers presented. Now, when Ray Rogers passed away in 2005, and he had given the thread samples that he was working on, he gave them to some other scientists at Los Alamos, and they continued his analysis, and he actually obtained even more thread samples from that same corner that Gilbert Ray's cut out. And using all kinds of really super expensive, high-tech spectroscopy gear. This is what, and 7 scientists were involved in this one. This was a press release released last month. It says this: the results of FTIR is a real fancy spectroscopy. The results of the FTIR analysis on all 3 threads taken from the raised sampling area adjacent to the carbon-14 sampling corner led to identification of the fibers as cotton and definitely not linen. Note that all age dating analysis were conducted on samples taken from the same area. Apparently, the age dating process, carbon-14, failed to recognize one of the first rules of analytical chemistry, that any sample taken for characterization of an area or population must necessarily be representative of the whole. Our analyses of the 3 thread samples taken from the raised and C14 sampling corners show that this was not the case. The recommendation that stemmed from the above analytical study is that a new age dating should be conducted, but assuring that the sample analyzed represents the original main shroud image area, i.e. the fibers must be linen and not cotton or some other material. It is only then that the age dating will be scientifically correct. So the significance of this is that additional research by other scientists at Los Alamos have confirmed the findings of Ray Rogers. Now, another scientist, Avinoam Danin, he presented an update on some of the botanical evidence on the shroud, and we know that there's a lot of pollen and flower images on the cloth. In fact, this is Max Frey. He's a Swiss criminologist, and back in 1973 and 78, he was given permission to take sticky tape samples, and he's applying that tape to the cloth. And when he removes that tape, stuck to the tape will be a sampling of dirt, dust, insect parts, and pollen, lots of pollen. And he, in fact, he sampled 28 different locations. And so the pollen occurs in large concentrations, to wit, it's not airborne pollen, it's pollen that got there because flowers were laid on the cloth. Now, there are also what are called off-body flower images, and this is a real obvious one. Perhaps you can see the petal formation of a chrysanthemum. You guys see that? And then there's also, this is pistachia, and you can see a stem and a berry formation, and this matches up with pistachia, which is a spice plant, and there's over 200 of these type of fruit assemblages that can be seen on the shroud. And of course we know from Scripture that they brought spices to the tomb, and I'm sure it was probably pistachia and probably some other spices as well. And then this is Zygophyllum domosum, and it's very kind of distinctive looking leaf and flower pattern is evident on the shroud. It's a native plant of Israel, Jordan, and Sinai, and its unique leaf pattern is visible on the shroud. This is Gundalia tourneforti, which is a thorny plant. In fact, 27% of the pollen found on the shroud comes from this plant, and in a large concentration right off from the side of the head. And so this plant was obviously placed on the shroud, and it's a thorny plant that blooms only in March and April, and it only grows within a 50-mile radius of Jerusalem. In fact, Avinoam Danin, professor of botany at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, Jewish, by the way, says this: using my database of more than 90,000 plant locations, the place that best fits the assemblage of the plant species whose images and pollen grains have been identified on the shroud is 10 to 20 kilometers east and west of Jerusalem. Now, the latest thing he did, he presented last month as well. And he's done further analysis on other photographs and even looking at some of the new holographic images that are being developed now. And he says this: more than 300 flowers were counted that resemble in size and morphology to those of Matricaria and Anthemis. I think that's how you say them. They're species of plants of the sunflower family. In order to place the flowers as they are seen in the photo, those who prepared the body of the man on the shroud for entombment had to remove the stems and place them individually. It was not a casual distribution. And I look at this and I say to myself, that's really significant, because it shows you how much the followers of Jesus adored him. They adored him. They loved him because he loved them. And it just creates a picture of how the followers, a lot of the women, and who knows, they had plenty of time that whole day to prepare for the inevitable burial. And they placed these flowers, banking the entire body all the way down to the feet, just banked the body with flowers.